Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back, Anastasia, Cosmic Astrologer. I'm going to talk about the upcoming solar eclipse, which is taking place on the 21st of June, 2020, which is also the solstice, the winter solstice for us in the Southern Hemisphere and the summer solstice for you guys in the Northern Hemisphere. So that within itself carries very distinct meanings. Just the solstice itself, it's a high energetic, astronomical, astrological, spiritual portal opening of energies. And obviously for the Northern Hemisphere, which is the majority of my viewers, this is a time where energy opens up and takes you out, okay, because it's a summer solstice and it's the sunlight, so it's got to do with days becoming longer. The longest days of the year start at this time. So it's an externalized type of energy. It marks the beginning of a new year to an extent. It's going to lead us to what's going to sort of unfold over the next 6 months. For the Southern Hemisphere, for us down here, because it's winter, it's very much an internal process. It's an inner stepping back, reflective process, pausing, sorting through things, working things out, very much from an inner reflective space. So it's very different for you guys in the Northern Hemisphere and very different for us in the Southern Hemisphere. That's one point. But in either case, it really is a very powerful spiritual energy that emanates actually from the sun, the earth, and the moon, really. So high vibration, high frequencies during this time. There can be lots of different rituals that can be practiced during this time. That these, practices and rituals have been going on for thousands of years, really, relative to this particular celebration. We could say it's a celebration of the solar forces, the solar energies, and obviously different cultures have different practices and so forth. A lot of that has been lost through the years, unfortunately, but there are a lot of people that still do honor, respect, appreciate, and understand the depth and the intensity of this energy and what it can actually bring, particularly when you are working on yourself, when you're doing the work. This is all about our own personal journey, not from a selfish point of view, but from a point of view of the more we work on ourselves, the more we improve on ourselves, the more we understand our deeper components, our unconscious material, the more we can work with that, heal it, resolve it, and so forth, the better we are as human beings on this planet. And the more we are evolving on our own personal evolutionary journey. So the more we improve on ourselves, the more the state of the world is going to improve. The state of the world is a reflection of our own consciousness. It's such an important point to understand, because if we break it down to what Jeffrey Wolf Green describes as the consensus state, the individuated state, and the spiritualized state. So that breaks it down to 80% of the population equates to the consensus reality, and about 15% or so would be the individuated state. That individuated group of people are the people that are doing the work. They are the people that are consciously trying to bring forth the most authentic version of themselves, as opposed to a consensus self, a conditioned self. And look, we are all conditioned. No one can say that they have never been conditioned. We are conditioned from this life, and we are also conditioned from previous lives. And what we're doing as we are trying to become more conscious and evolve is to remove the conditions that keep us limited or suppressed, in order for us to live a more authentic and sovereign life. So these sorts of ceremonies and celebrations are at really important junctures in terms of cycles in life, because astrology in one way can be summarized as it reflecting the nature of the cycles of life that we have over many years, we have over many lifetimes, we have them over weeks, we have them every month with the lunation cycle, we have them every day. The lunation energy, the luna, the goddess, the moon, she correlates to all of our inner rhythms, the rhythms that define and process and work through everything in our physical body. That's why the moon acts as a container. It's literally the physical body. So life is rhythms, life is cycles, and that's what astrology reflects back to us. And it's about understanding the nature of those cycles and what they mean on a collective level, and what they mean to each of us individually as we are going through our journey in life. So a solstice time is a really beautiful opportunity spiritually for our growth, our evolution, our development, and our understanding and our inner standing of where we are at this point in life. Obviously in our own personal journey, and obviously in terms of how we are relating to the nature of events, to the world at large, with everything that's going on as well. Now, the solar eclipse that occurs on the 21st of June is at 0 degrees of Cancer, which is why it's the solstice. That's when we have the solstice, when the sun and the moon are there together at 0 degrees. And 0 degrees of cardinal signs, Cancer is a cardinal sign, are what's known as critical degrees. So that there's something very powerful about the energy of 0 degrees of cardinal signs. Big things happen, big shifts happen. They're not, they don't go unnoticed. Now, Cancer is a yin, feminine sign, so therefore it does have very much to do with our inner reality, if you like. It's got to do with our own inner self-image, subjective self. That's Cancer. Cancer is the archetype that correlates to the subjective self. What sort of image is projected? So the soul incarnates, Pluto takes on the form of the body and projects a self-image, which becomes you, the person that you are, the name that you have, the age that you are, the location you were born in, the family you were born into. All those identities are a projected self-image, which is Cancer. This particular solar eclipse, actually, before I start describing some of the features to it, those of you that have planets at 0 degrees of Cancer, at 0 degrees of Capricorn, will experience this eclipse forming a conjunction to those planets, or an opposition. A conjunction if you have planets in Cancer, an opposition if you have planets in Capricorn. Conjunctions and oppositions are usually the most powerful aspects in eclipses. However, sometimes square aspects can also have an impact as well. That would just depend on you, your birth chart, and what's actually going on in your life. Those of you that have planets at late degrees of Gemini or late degrees of Sagittarius will also have this eclipse forming a conjunction or an opposition. It's out of sign. However, if you had the sun at 28, 29 degrees of Sag or Gemini, then that eclipse is going to form an aspect, an out of sign aspect as we call it, but it's still there. The energy is still quite potent because of the distance between the eclipse and, say, your sun in Sag or your sun in Gemini is very, very close in proximity in relation to orbs. The distance between the solar eclipse and one of your personal planets, if it's at late Sag or late Gemini, it's very close. So it experiences the frequency, the energy. So a few signs then really come into the mix. The square aspect if this eclipse is squaring any of your planets, it would mean that you have some planets in Aries or in Libra. Okay, so those signs can come into the picture as well. But those fine-tuning details are not something that I could go into in a presentation like this, but this is just something I'm letting you know so that you can look into it yourself. And of course, if you want a personal reading to fine-tune these details, you can always contact me. Now, solar eclipses are so powerful from many, many levels, but from the point of view of time frame, the window of that energy being open, the energy can start building up, 3 months prior to the actual eclipse, 2-3 months prior, and can still be activated, quite a few weeks post the eclipse date as well. So it's not just about looking at the 21st of June, it's really about having an awareness about this window of energy being open, right, relative to this particular eclipse. So it's a couple of months either side. Solar eclipses are quite different to lunar eclipses, and they're both equally as powerful, but their manifestation, their impact seems to be different. Solar eclipses seem to bring up more crisis-orientated events. That's just the nature of solar eclipses. They are, and if you think about a solar eclipse, it's the sun and moon forming a conjunction. It's a new moon, basically, right? But the reason it's an eclipse is because of the position of the moon's nodes during the eclipse, which happen to line up with the sun and the moon. The north node is conjunct the solar eclipse, and the south node is opposite. So the nodes have to be into pretty close proximity for various types of eclipses, because there's total solar eclipses, there's annular, there's several types, right? Solar eclipses, because of the nature of the new moon, which implies something is not quite seen yet, right? It's a new moon is it's dark by its very nature. So there's something that's been germinating, or that is germinating rather, and that's trying to come through the soil, as it were, and basically spring forth, come forth, give birth to, right? So it's material that belongs to the unconscious components, you could say, on a collective level and also on an individual level. So it brings forth material that is usually out of sight, out of our conscious awareness, and it brings it up so that we can see it. And usually what it brings up, particularly when we are not in alignment, this is where the crisis comes in, when we are not on track with what we need to be on track with in our own personal life, relative to relationships, life journey. It can be all aspects of life, or it can be one more specific area, because maybe this solar eclipse happens to be very close to your Venus or very close to your Mars. Now, if it's close to your Mars or Venus, it's going to have to do, Venus specifically, it's going to have to do with your relationships. It could have to do with money matters as well, but it's without question relationships. If it's Mars and you're a female, it could have to do with your relationships as well, relative to if you are a heterosexual female and you have heterosexual relationships, and it's got to do with the men in your life. It could also have to do with your own actions. Mars is our actions, it's how we act on things. So there can be information, material that comes up into your consciousness that was hidden, and or that was not in alignment with where you need to be. So when you're not in alignment, it can be quite shocking what comes up. It can be quite a critical, crisis-orientated event that really shifts your whole life. These eclipses are very, very powerful. They belong to a family of eclipses that started a long time ago. So this particular solar eclipse, for instance, belongs to a family of eclipses, Saros cycle of eclipses, Saros series, that began in the year 1389. So this solar eclipse that we're about to have belongs to a family that was born in that year. And the completion of that cycle is in 2633. So these family of eclipses have really, really, really long periods, obviously, long cycles that can speak to other lifetimes that we've had as well. And so this solar eclipse can be a continuation of energy relative to your past lives and something that you may be working through this lifetime. There's so many ways of understanding this in bigger picture terms. This particular Saros series, according to Bernadette Brady, who is an expert on eclipses, states that it's quite a difficult cycle. And I will read to you just a short paragraph of how she frames this particular eclipse. It's difficult in nature, okay? So let's just have a look at the chart and unpack a few details. So let me just share my screen. Hope you guys are doing well, by the way, wherever you are located. As you guys know, I'm here in Australia. We're really into full winter, but there's loads of sun. So it's lovely to have, you know, some sun in winter. There's nothing more beautiful than that. Okay, so here is the chart of the solar eclipse. It is done for Melbourne, Australia, so naturally it will look different relative to your specific location. So we're not concerned with, for the purposes of this presentation at least, we're not concerned with where everything is located. We are just interested in looking at the aspects, okay? So here is a solar eclipse at 0 degrees of Cancer, 21 minutes. By the way, I had a look at the Sabian symbol and I would just like to, I just dropped a crystal and it cracked, and that happens sometimes and you just have to let it be. I'm not happy with that because I just bought it recently, but there's a reason why that happened. I'll figure it out. Okay. So the eclipse is 0 degrees of Cancer, so we would look at the degree of 1 degrees, okay, in this book. Here's the book that I use. There's a couple of books around for Sabian symbols. This is by Dane Rudyard. This is the one that I always use. An Astrological Mandela, the cycle of transformations, and its 360 symbolic phases. So for those of you that are not familiar with this method, what it is it's a book that goes through every single degrees of the zodiac, which means 360 degrees. So the 12 zodiac signs, when you add them up, they equal 360 degrees, which is the circle that you see in front of you. And every degree in each sign has a specific metaphor, meaning, symbolism. And that's what this book reflects back to us. And the work of this book was made with Dane Rudyard and a psychic woman that he sat with in a park somewhere. And he would say, okay, one degree of Cancer, being the 4th sign of the zodiac, first decan of Cancer. He would say that to her, and she would receive an image of what that particular degree symbolizes. And that's how this book came about, in short. Now, the Sabian symbol for zero Cancer, which is 1 degree Cancer, is it's pretty powerful, actually, even just from the point of view of what's happening collectively at the moment, particularly relative to the events that started in America with George Floyd. And I'm not interested in unpacking conspiracy theories about that. Everyone can have their own personal opinion. I don't mind. It's it's neither here nor there to me. But I'm just simply putting that out there because there will be people watching this that will have their own theories about that particular event. And I'm not here to discuss conspiracy theories. I'm here to discuss astrology and the symbolism. Okay. So 1 degree of Cancer, here is the heading for this particular degrees. On a ship, the sailors lower an old flag and raise a new one. Honestly, it's such a beautiful heading phrase, because you can interpret that in so many different ways, but the way I kind of feel the interpretation to that, it's talking about an old flag going and raising a new one. It's pretty obvious what that means. We're talking about an old system of how things or people have been valued or undervalued, acknowledged or not, understood or not. So that old way of how certain groups of people, Indigenous people specifically, of many cultures and many countries universally, we know, have been mistreated for thousands of years. That's not a conspiracy theory, that is a fact. So we are facing times, without question, that speak to a revolution absolutely beginning. We've had many of these through the history of the world. And this is another one at a different level, though. And that's what I feel this particular Sabian symbol really reflects relative to this solar eclipse, actually. Lowering an old flag and raising a new one, it's just so beautiful. The keynote for this Sabian symbol is a radical change of allegiance exteriorized in a symbolic act, a point of no return. Again, we have a very powerful keynote for this Sabian symbol, which I think speaks for itself relative to the collective events more specifically. This may speak to you personally as well. If this eclipse is hitting something in your chart, particularly a personal planet, there may be some resonance with what I've just read. Okay. So that's really all I wanted to read about the Sabian symbol, which I think is quite telling. Now, let's have a look at the chart. Okay. So the first thing that I notice immediately is there is an inconjunct or a quincunx. Both those terms mean the same thing. Okay, it's an aspect that is 150 degrees when it's on the gibbous side, right? So there is an inconjunct with the solar eclipse new moon to Saturn. You see Saturn here is at 0 of Aquarius, and the solar eclipse new moon is at 0 of Cancer. That distance between that new moon and the position of Saturn is 150 degrees, which is called an inconjunct. It's a gibbous inconjunct because the full phase has not been formed yet. As that new moon moves forward, it will eventually reach an oppositional point, and then it will go to the other side of the quincunx, which will be in Virgo, and that's the other set. So there's two frequency points of the inconjunct aspect. One is the one that's leading, which is this one that you see on the screen right now, which is an inner, internal crisis that goes on, because the inconjunct aspect correlates to an inner crisis. Could be an outer one if it's the other inconjunct, but it's a crisis. And it's a crisis relative to having to have to readjust something within our lives, within ourselves, within our journey, within very specific matters. Now, from a collective point of view, this is really speaking to I suppose we could say the tension, the crisis point that we've reached collectively relative to the adjustments we have to make. And more specifically, it's got to do with the nature of our reality, Saturn, the nature of the structure of reality that we have projected, which is fundamentally transforming. And in Aquarius, it's a new order, new structure to a new level of humanity that we will see as Saturn continues his journey in the sign of Aquarius for the next 2.5 years. So this is a cycle that will unfold over that period of time. But this solar eclipse is talking about critical events opening up, taking place relative to this inner adjustment that we need to make to what we project as our reality. And it's not easy, because solar eclipses are never easy energies, and it is Cancer, which is inner yin energy, which has also got to do with our safety, what makes us feel safe, our level of security, and the self-image we project to have this identity that we have. All of that is being changed at the moment. And it is being changed collectively, because this movement relative to George Floyd has had a universal impact, which, in my opinion, is absolutely necessary without question. But the crisis that it's brought up, the loss, the pain, the violence, there's many levels that have come up, which actually, when it comes to USA and the National Chart of America, the Chart of New York, and the Chart of Manhattan, New York, which I made a post about a few days ago. Some of you may have seen it, and I'm going to do a video on that. Really speak very clearly to the current events that are taking place in America, which has sparked off a universal impact, really, and a necessary one. So anyway, I was just saying that this energy of this solar eclipse has because it's a feminine yin energy, which is inner, it has a real heightened sensitivity to it, without question. So that's one major aspect to this solar eclipse. There's clearly something that we need to really work on, that's quite critical within our own perception of our own self-image relative to the world and who we think we are. Saturn in conjunct this new moon. It is more of an internal experience, because, as I said, it's a quincunx that's in the part of that phase that belongs to the gibbous, and the gibbous is very much an inner reorientation. The quincunx as well speaks to our blind spots, and the blind spots can be very difficult to see. That's why they're called blind spots. But it is something that we have to try to resolve within ourselves, try to understand and understand what this may be speaking to relative on a personal level to each of us, right? So a lot of the shift that's going to be taking place, despite the external appearances that are going on, there's a lot going on in much deeper realms energetically on a collective level that we can't quite see at the moment, but we will as time unfolds. The other matter is that this solar eclipse is basically at the midpoint of North Node and Mercury. Now, this is very interesting to me because the North Node is always, in this case, collectively, it's referring to our evolution moving forward. So the North Node in Gemini has very much to do with learning new information. We've got the South Node in Sagittarius, which does correlate to truth, but it also correlates to religion and philosophical ideologies and so forth, and some of which are definitely very relevant to this day and will be for eons perhaps. But there are some truths, as it were, that we need to understand don't actually inform our evolution moving forward. So the North Node in Gemini is asking us to learn new information, to have a different understanding, to acquire more knowledge on every platform, really, relative to the evolution of the collective and the earth moving forward, because that's what evolution is. Evolution means proceeding forward, developing, growing, evolving, right? That obviously has to include learning new information, new things, approaching things in new ways, things like that. So Mercury is the ruler to the North Node in this chart, as you can see, because the North Node is in Gemini. So this solar eclipse is contained within Mercury and the North Node. And Mercury is in Cancer and retrograde. So again, there's quite a inner process going on here, because Cancer is an inner yin feminine sign. The solar eclipse is in Cancer. Mercury is retrograde, which speaks to internal processing from a mental level in terms of our information, knowledge, data, and so forth. So there's a very important process that's going on here relative to this solar eclipse in terms of the information that will rise, that will be given birth into the collective and into our own minds because of this solar eclipse. So the solar eclipse is going to it's going to bring this energy of new information into our consciousness. Okay, North Node, solar eclipse, Mercury. North Node, future, evolution, direction, Gemini, information, Mercury ruling the North Node, and Mercury being retrograde, it's gone in and under. It's going within to retrieve this information for us. So new information is going to come out relative to the current events that are going on in the world as well. As I said before, because it's the summer solstice for many of you and the winter solstice for many of us down here in the Southern Hemisphere, it's quite an interesting experience actually, because we have the collective, which is experiencing an energy portal in two opposing ways. You guys are being taken out into the solar light, as it were, and we have to go into, you could say, the lunar light. We have to go in because it's winter here for us. It's both points are a point of spiritual energy opening up, but just from different points of view and different points of experience, both equally powerful. Okay, so here's what Bernadette says about the energy of this solar eclipse. It's not great, so I'm just giving you the heads up. She says it will bring restriction, inhibition, restraint, separation, and illusions are the trademarks of this family of eclipses. Events can occur which seem to block the individual. In this blocking, the individual is very prone to misjudge his or her strengths or the situation and is best advised to wait until the eclipse passes before taking any real action. This is a difficult Saros series. So those are the words of Bernadette. Here's the book I'm reading out of because many of you will ask. Bernadette Brady, Eagle and the Lark. It's a book based on predictive astrology. Essentially, I don't recommend you go out, run and get this book if you are a beginner, unless you are absolutely dedicated to studying astrology, because otherwise you'll waste your money, because it's not a book that somebody would read who is just interested in, watching a video here and there and listening to different presentations relative to monthly forecasts and so forth. This is for people who are practicing or working towards practicing astrology. It's quite a technical book, in other words, okay? But it is an awesome book if you want to grow with your astrological tools and understanding. So clearly it's a difficult eclipse. And look, it's happening on the 21st of June, but it's already happened. The energy of this is present everywhere. All we need to do is just take a look around at the world and everything that's going on. So the events that have transpired, for instance, in the US, over the last couple of weeks, which has triggered a universal standing up for all lives actually matter. Black lives matter, of course, but every life matters. And that's really the bigger picture, which actually brings in unison, unity. Division occurs when we have this split of black and white, which is Gemini. And there's the North Node in Gemini. So we need to, every single one of us, regardless of our external appearance, we need to all stand in unison from the level of every living being, including the animal kingdom, every little insect, ant, fly, whatever, everything, every living being that has been born deserves to live the life it was given. No human being has the right to make a judgment on that in any way, ever. And that's the true point of unison and unity, when we all stand in that space collectively as a family. That's where we are heading. And those that can't stand there will be left behind in this sense of separation and division, which ultimately does bring conflict. Now, conflict sometimes is necessary, I agree. Absolutely necessary. But there are many different faces to that. There are many different ways of interpreting that. And then comes in, unfortunately, that will bring in the left brain, and that will bring in all the judgments, all the right and wrong, and so on and so forth. We have to go beyond that. We have to go beyond that left linear brain and connect to our intuition and connect to understanding the larger cosmological picture that's evolution. So that's just a few comments for you guys to consider relative to this solar eclipse. It is not an easy one. We just had the lunar eclipse. When was it? On the 5th of June in Sagittarius. We have this solar eclipse in the same month, obviously. And then on the 5th of July, we have, oops, I didn't mean to do that. So where is it? There you go. 5th of July, we have this lunar eclipse. This is done for Melbourne, Australia as well, at 13 degrees Cancer Capricorn. So it's the energy is the same in a lot of ways because we're still dealing with Cancer Capricorn energy, right? Which is about our external reality and structure and our inner reality, inner landscape, soul, inner life. I'll probably do a video for this anyway and just talk about it because it's a separate chart, it's a separate eclipse, so I don't want to bombard you with that at the moment. But I just wanted to mention that. And as well, we have another lunar eclipse on the 30th of November, which will be in Sagittarius and Gemini. And then finally, at the end of the year, on the 15th of December, we have a total solar eclipse, right, which is in Sag Gemini again, okay? So we are really in the midst, in the heart of these, the energies of these eclipses. And this solar eclipse especially is the more difficult one out of all of these. As far as I can remember, I'll have to recheck that, but I'm pretty sure it's the most difficult one. Even just, as I said, 0 degrees of cardinal signs are critical degrees in astrology. So cardinal is the quality or energy that creates change. It's things change when there's crisis, obviously, and when things are acted on, and that's what this solar eclipse has triggered. It's triggered this whole movement, this whole action of things that need to happen on the earth, on the world, relative to not the earth herself, of course, because the earth is perfect herself. She's perfect in her rhythms, her cycles, in everything that she offers us. It's the collective human race that is imperfect, you could say, and that really needs to evolve, actually, particularly the 80%, which is the consensus reality. And that's all the Pluto in Capricorn that we've had since 2008. Pluto is going to go into Aquarius in, I think it's 2022. It's not far away at all. So that's, we'll talk about that as we get closer to it. But, these deconstruction of these false realities that have been projected out there are all being smashed down in so many ways, on so many levels, since Pluto entered Capricorn anyway. And this is just another aspect of this larger cycle, you could say. So I hope that if this eclipse does hit something personal in your chart, I hope that you can work through it okay. I hope you understand it. If you don't, you can always contact me. I've already had a couple of people who have been triggered by this eclipse, and it's revealed unimaginable things in their lives, actually. And whilst something that can come through this eclipse that is revealed to you that might just be unfathomable, or just completely unbelievable, it's still okay. It's still okay, because knowing that, seeing that, understanding that gives you choice. It gives you choice to empower yourself with the direction you wish to take, or what it is you need to really understand, process, and work through relative to the material that's been brought to your awareness, because that's what this eclipse is doing, right? On a personal level, okay? On a collective level, we can see what's going on. And I really love that Sabian symbol that I read to you guys. The old flag, it's gone. That's just a metaphor for the old value systems and level of consciousness that have been in play for such a long time have to be dismantled, and they are. And it's had to come through crisis, clearly. That's how things change. Crisis just means opportunity, basically, for change. So if you have planets at late degrees of Sag and Gemini, this eclipse is likely to trigger those planets for you as well. Have a think about the key points that I've identified. If anything wasn't clear, or if you'd just like to add some of your own comments, I'm happy for you guys to do that underneath, as frequently a lot of you do. And I'll see you guys really soon with some more updates. And wishing you all lots of love and blessings. Hope that you're all doing well, regardless of the external appearances of things that are going on. We are living in the most powerful times of our lifetime this time. All of us that are born have been born in the last 80, 70, 60, 50, 40, 20, 10 years, whatever. Those of us on the planet now are witnessing the most profound transformations and changes that are changing the nature of reality. And that's exactly what needs to be happening. So trust the process of the collective evolution by being conscious and acting consciously as well, and trust your own inner internal guidance, emotional system, intuitive system, and trust that your journey is unfolding as it needs to as well. And reach out if you need some extra guidance. Much love, and see you soon. Thanks for watching.